Hello and welcome back to Learn It from a Layman. I'm Carl Christensen, joined tonight by Tim. I put the density in population Cox.
That's right. Population density wouldn't be so dense without me.
It's true. The significantly less dense. We're going to talk about demographics today. So that seemed apropos. Tim, you want to give us the definition of apropos?
Thing people say.
What?
You keep saying apropos like it's a thing people say.
I think it is. A certain segment of the population.
Yeah,
like a certain demographic.
From the 1800s. Certain demographic.
I've heard a lot of lawyers say apropos, so I'm just trying to get into the in crowd.
That's an argument against it.
We've had Mick McGurr, attorney at law, on our podcast, Tim. So let's not slander.
That proves the rule. Slander. I'll stick to libel.
Yes, exactly. Wait, does anybody print your work? I don't think it can be libel if it's not printed.
Yeah, well, that's. I'm gonna get it printed eventually once I get some.
Okay. Demographics. Let's talk a little bit about demographics. Demographics are well, before I guess. So let me give the definition, and then we'll talk a little bit about why even discussing demographics for some people is a touchy subject, maybe. But all right, demographics is.
Let me real quick start you out just to give the layman a ramp up to this. Demographics. So you walk into Costco and they have those big LCD screens up with like the aquarium and the really beautiful, scenes going across. You're like, wow, check out those graphics and demographics.
Okay. Nope. But I appreciate the somewhat lackluster attempt at humor. So
picky.
Okay, demographics are statistical data relating to the population and particular groups within the population. So there are, I guess, 7 main demographic characteristics, 7 common variables gathered in research. That's age, sex, income level, race, employment, location, home ownership, and level of education. And so demographics is often used in social science research, but it's also frequently used in politics. And that's why you get kind of this hot button feel if you're talking about demographics. However, demographics are really just facts, right? They're just, it's census data. It's trying to figure out what, just trends and actually identify characteristics of your population. And so it is of itself not political at all. And that's what we do here at Learn It from a Layman, is just discuss facts that the layman should know. And being familiar with demographics, I think, is useful because it gives you a picture and kind of a global awareness. What you want to do with that is up to you. I hope useful and constructive things, but the actual discussion of the facts of, population density and age and all these other things, they're just what they are. And whatever spin you want to put on them is any projection of the future is also things we're not particularly interested in, because the future is an unknowable variable. So but with things that we know or have done pretty good extrapolation of the data that we have to be able to figure out what what income levels are, because we can't always get exact data, or we, as if I were a social scientist or a demographic scientist even. But Tim, any addendum on my explanation of demographic?
So a demographic scientist, aka demographinator. Yeah.
That's there's a movie about that. Is it with Arnold Schwarzenegger?
Yeah. I'll survey back.
Get to the chopper.
Demographer, I guess, would be the word. But yeah, no, I agree with everything you said. So
that
far.
Seems incredibly unlikely.
Yeah. Well, I'm saving my punches.
Okay, so let's talk about some interesting demographic statistics and some of the things that we can learn based on some of this data that's been assembled. So let's talk. So we're a worldwide podcast. So I thought we'd start with talking about world demographics, world population, and I think people are aware that we crossed the $8 billion. I'm struggling. 8 billion person count, the
Carl,
population of the world.
Don't feel bad. I lost count after 7 billion. So
it's really tricky up there in the low 8 billion counting. Yeah, we're over 8 billion people in the world now as of 2022, and the projections, once again, projections I'm less interested in, but they at least give you an idea. And we'll talk a little bit more about where population is headed, but based on current data. But projected 9 million as sometime in around the year 2037.
9 million. That's right.
Did I say 9 million?
Drastic drop.
I just predicted an Armageddon of truly epic. I mean, that would. Wow. Okay. 9 billion people in 2037.
Give or take a decimal point or 3.
One of the interesting things about this demographic, though, is if you look at world population over the course of the last couple hundred years, you see just an exponential spike, and that is true. So from the year 1804. The population of the world was 1 billion. And that's, just slightly over 200 years ago. And that was 1 billion. So you can imagine that the thousands and thousands of years before that, compared to the last 200 years, if you put it all on a graph, it looks exponential. It is the case, though, if you graph it out by the last 200 years, you can see that there was a massive spike, but that we're starting to see kind of a more traditional growth in population, as far as it's no longer exponential, it's more linear. And anyway, so 1804, we had 1 billion. By the year 1960, we had 3 billion. In 1999, we had 6 billion. And so in the last 24 years, we've added an extra 2 billion people to the world. But yeah, that's world population. Let's talk a little bit about population age and the ratio of sexes. So age-wise,
which is a factor in that booming increase.
Yeah. For sure. Longevity is absolutely a huge part of this. And it turns out that a lot of the reason that we have the growth in population that we've seen in the last 10 to 15 years has less to do actually with the birth rate and more to do with longevity. So let's talk, like I said, so as far as total life expectancy and age of the population, the global average life expectancy right now is 73.3 years as of 2022. Men are living shorter than women by an average of about 5 years. But it says approximately 26.3% of the global population is under age 15. 65%, almost 66% is aged between 15 and 64, and 8% is 65 or over. So hold that in your memory real quick. If you want to picture kind of a pie chart, the biggest chunk is that between 15 and 64, right? 66%. Because if you then look at some of the specific data for particular countries, you see a very different picture. For example, right now in Japan, and by right now I mean this data is a few years old, but the number of people in Japan that are age 65 plus is almost 37 million out of 126 million. So we're looking at, more than a quarter, a little bit less than a third of the people in Japan are aged over 65 years old. And so the demographics in different countries look very different than the worldwide demographics, is the point. And has to do, one, with the health system. Like I said, the idea that in particular countries you can get health care for elderly people that keeps them alive for longer. It also has to do with the birth rate. And so let's talk a little bit about the fertility rate, which is kind of the demographic term for how many children are born to women. So in 2010, the global fertility rate was estimated at 2.44. As a rule, the population, in order to keep the population steady, it needs the total fertility rate needs to be somewhere around 2.1 because of childhood mortality and all the other accidents that lead to people dying off. So before they reach full age. So fertility rate at 2.44 per children per woman, 2.44 children per women is obviously significantly less than it used to be. But that is what the
rate
global
would not
rate is right
sustain exponential growth.
Correct, exactly, and that's what we're seeing is that right now there are very few countries that have most what we term Western countries in Europe and the United States have fertility rates that are either at or below replacement level, and so that is.
Most industrialized nations are now below. I'm trying to think of any what we would the Western or industrialized nations that are still above replacement level. I can't think of any, but can you? I mean,
Yeah.
United States is below replacement level.
Right. Yes. United States is close. I think I have that statistic here somewhere, but I've got a bunch of different statistics that I'm going to go through here. But you're right. Most and Europe and Japan are kind of the leading tip as far as saying that they're the very significantly below for the for total fertility rate necessary to maintain a particular population. So if you're wondering, the layman does frequently wonder these things. Well, what is it like? How come population still growing in places like the United States, the UK, Italy? It's almost entirely from immigration. So when you're having people immigrate, as opposed to having children being born in those countries, and that's how you're seeing population growth. Just as I was saying, this is significantly lower than it used to be. As of 2021, the fertility rate of the world was 2.32. If we just look back, what is that? 32 years now. The difference, once again, this is at a worldwide level, so these numbers are massive as far as the significance and small changes, but it's 2.32 as of 2021. 32 years ago, we're looking at over 3. And that's a massive difference, obviously, if you're looking at the population growth as of 32 years ago versus now. Mortality rate, though, is infant mortality and life expectancy. So infant mortality has dropped a massive percentage. So infant mortality per 1,000 births 32 years ago was 63. So every 1,000 births, there were almost 64 infant mortality rate. So that's so high. It's hard to like. That's that not even conceivable. As of 2021, it's 28. So we've cut that in a third in the last 32 years. So that's really thanks to modern medicine and good medical care, and medical care that did exist 32 years ago that didn't exist in underdeveloped countries. So that's starting to make inroads into countries that otherwise didn't have access to modern medicine. Life expectancy similarly has gone up from 64 about from 1992 all the way up to 71 worldwide in 2021. So lots of progress from perspective of medical advancements and the ability to get those to the masses across the world, and that obviously then shows you that the growth that we've seen in population has a lot to do with that, as opposed to the total fertility rate, which has dropped significantly. But that is a little bit of the world statistics. The real quick population distribution, and this is, I think most laymen are familiar with this, but let's just go per continent. So in Asia, right, as of 2019, it's almost 60% of the world's population lived in Asia. Obviously, the leading countries in that are China and India, who together have over 2 billion people. So that's a significant portion.
And yeah, more than 1 billion apiece for each. And just for comparison, the United States is the third most populous country with less than 300 million. So right. I got those right, Carl?
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm.
And so you think about that, triple the size of the United States, and it's still not as big in population-wise as either India or China. And right. They both have massive populations. And of course, I'll insert this fun fact right now. India just a few months ago passed China as the most populous nation in the world.
So did we throw them a party? So
that's right. I think there's like a trophy that kind of gets passed around.
It's like your fantasy football trophy in the office.
That's right.
Yes. So yeah, those are two massive countries with huge populations, and the that obviously contributes largely to the idea the population for the for that continent, like I was talking about. So, where was I? Asia. I said 4 billion. Africa has 1.3 billion. I was giving it percentages before. Where did I put that stat? Here it is. So 16.7% for Africa. Europe has 9.8% of the world population. North America 7.2, South America 5.5, and then 0.5% for Oceania, and Antarctica has 0. So that's population by continent. Real quick breakdown of just like Tim said, the most populous countries. India has passed China as the #1 populous country in the world, the United States, and then it's Indonesia, Pakistan, Nigeria, Brazil, Bangladesh, Russia, and Mexico, top 10. So it kind of also gives you an insight. I was going to talk a little bit about population density. We talked a little bit about what that means, but how much, how many people live in a particular area. So as a 2023 population density in the world is 54 people per square kilometer, or 140 people per mile if you're backward like us from the United States. Calculating the total land area of, so then it says the whole amount of area across the whole world. So 54 people per kilometer, it gives you an idea that there are super dense areas, And then there are super rural areas, something that we obviously knew, but demographics also gives you a way to quantify that. And I think it's really interesting to see, and there are a few stats out there, but I'm going to give it you obviously in an audio format. I can't show it to you, but the world population in the last 70 years has become significantly more urban. Population density essentially meaning in urban areas where big city centers have become significantly more dense, and rural areas have become significantly more sparse. So the majority of population is building in urban areas or growing in urban areas. So in 1955, we were looking at about 68% of the population was rural and 32% was urban. Now this is 1955. Sounds like a while ago, but obviously that's post agricultural revolution. It's not like we have just a bunch of farmers out there, but as of 1955, over 68% of the population was still living in rural areas. Fast forward to 2023, it's now 43% in rural and 57% urban. So it's already flipped. More people live in cities, in large cities, than in rural areas, and the trend appears to be accelerating, not decelerating. So population density, if you drive outside of your urban center, is probably dropping. The number of people that live in these rural areas, you see it in Midwestern United States, where it's hard to sell a house. People don't want to live there, as opposed to going to these major city centers, New York, LA, and population there is increasing significantly. Tim, any insight?
Just to wrap your head around how huge some of these urban areas are, you can consider the greater Tokyo metropolitan area. One of the largest metropolitan centers in the world. And if you take all the contiguous city population there and add it up, the whole population is approximately equal to the population of California. Imagine all of California clustered into one city.
It is crazy. And actually, I have a number for that.
California is pretty populous, It's a lot of people.
I live there, I know.
Yeah. But these are huge cities, dozens of millions of people. Anyways, it's. Yeah,
it's 2,777 people per square kilometer in Tokyo.
Wow.
And once again, if you look, the first number I gave you, which is total population density for the world, 54 people per square kilometer, and Tokyo is over 2,777. So yeah, a little bit more dense than the average. But yeah, that's Shanghai is the most densely populated urban area in China, which has get this, 6,168 people per kilometer.
Wow.
Yeah. So Shanghai is just
per square kilometer, right?
Per square. What did I say? But yeah.
Well, kilometer.
Square kilometer.
If it's 6,000 plus per kilometer, that would be. Okay, everyone line up. Okay, pack it in.
Everyone's got to stand in the line the whole time they live in Shanghai. No. So yeah, that Shanghai. I have been to China. I have not been to Shanghai. Tim, have you been to Shanghai?
Only in my mind and heart.
Yeah. So I don't know. I've been to Beijing. I've been to Hong Kong. Those are super densely populated in my mind, but apparently it pales in comparison to Shanghai. So, but get this, that's still not the most densely populated area. I pulled that up right now. Apparently Mumbai holds the claim as the most densely populated urban area at over 18,000 people per square kilometer.
Wow.
Crazy. 18,000 people. A square kilometer. A square kilometer is not that big.
Yeah. Yeah, that's, I think, a town of 18,000. That's pack it into a, huh.
Into a
Do
square
you have
kilometer.
the stats on the most densely populated country? Is it Bangladesh?
Do I have that? That's major cities. Let's find out. I don't see it off, right away here.
Probably
But
some like a city, you know, nation like maybe Singapore or something. I don't know.
yeah, that would make sense. I might have that somewhere, Tim, but I've got a lot of data open here. So, which is about most populous countries. No, that's not it.
We'll crowdsource
Oh,
it.
here we go. I've
Many
got it. I found it.
all right.
I found it, Tim. I found it.
Ooh.
It's Singapore.
Oh,
So you're
okay.
correct.
Cool.
Population density of the whole country of Singapore, which for those of you that are familiar with your geography, Singapore is just an island. But it is 8,235 people per square kilometer.
Wow, for the whole country, huh?
Yep. So quite dense. Though, wait, I'm confused. How did they rank this? Oh yeah, yep. And then Bangladesh is second at 1,116.
Okay.
I was looking at a population number, and Bangladesh's population is 165 million, as opposed to Singapore's 6 million. But obviously, then over the area, the square kilometers of Singapore are 719. So not a lot of area to distribute the population. Anyway, so there's some of the worldwide data. And like I said, you can extrapolate or use whatever, is it telling you anything the layman didn't know? Probably not, but it is, I think it paints a clear picture of what's happened in the world, and urbanization, and where growth is happening and where it isn't happening. As far as growth rate is concerned, Nigeria, I believe, is the #1 country. At least from 1990 to 2010, Nigeria grew at a rate of 62%.
That's probably, I imagine that's why I know that demographers project that Nigeria will, in short order, a generation or two, pass many countries and leap onto one of the highest spots on the list for population. I think it'll pass the United States within the next 50 years, which is interesting because if you look at Nigeria, its total area is not that much greater than, I think, the state of Texas, so it's
sure.
It's
densely populated as well. I think you're right. I might have the statistic somewhere here, but I don't see it offhand. But yeah, that's the growth rate there in Nigeria is obviously astounding. The United States is still growing significantly. Once again, this is older data that I'm looking at here as of 2010, from that 20-year period from 1990 to 2010. The United States grew at a 22% clip, which is a pretty good growth rate, but a lot of that really is thanks to immigration. Some of that obviously is still the fact that as of 1990 and through some of the 2000s, I believe the United States was still above the fertility rate required to be a growing country. I don't believe that's true anymore, and I'll see if I can back that up before the end of the podcast and see if I have that data.
I'll second that. I've read that the United States is no longer above replacement level, but you can find the stat. That'll be nice to have the number.
I did find the number for the total fertility rate for the United States. So in 1800s, the average U.S. woman had 7 children. So average U.S. female had 7 children. By the first decade of the 1900s, average. That's the average in 1800. You have to once again figure in the fact that infant mortality was just huge. By the first decade of the 1900s, this number had already decreased to 3.5, so cut in half in 100 years. Since the 1970s, the birth rate has been below replacement level of 2.1. And as of 2018, the number was 1.72.
Which is substantially below.
Yeah, and I guess 2021 is the most recent data, and it's 1.664. So it continues to drop. So we
I
are
believe.
certainly, yeah.
Oh, I was saying that it didn't. The COVID pandemic put a pretty big dent in fertility rates worldwide.
That might be true. I'm not entirely sure what those statistics look like. I think also as another part of the statistic, woman or this demographic number, women's mean age at first birth. I think that at some point in history is probably wildly low, like in their teen years. But women's mothers' first mean age at first birth now stands at 27.1 years.
Mm.
So women are older when they have their first, which obviously then makes it significantly you're significantly less likely to have multiple babies if you're starting later in life. So, but yeah, completed the total fertility rate for the United States stands most recently at 1.664. And once again, for population maintenance, just keeping the same number of people, we'd be looking at needing 2.1% or 2.1 children per woman. So we're almost 0.5 below that as of 2021. So just wanted to get that in there. One other thing before we leave world demographics behind here, once again, something I was interested in, and I think a lot of the laymen are, is the percentage or the men versus woman total amounts. And it turns out it's a 1.01 to 1 ratio. As of 2020, the global sex ratio is 1.01 males to 1 female.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I saw a graphic for that as well, and it's interesting because it does it by age group as well. And this graphic that I saw, and it shows that for the first 60 years of life, there are surplus males, more males than females, and then in the last 20 years of life, or 20 to 30 people living into their 90s, obviously, there's a surplus of females because men have died off.
Is the initial surplus due to gender bias, people aborting female babies or that kind of thing, or is there another reason for it?
So as far as like what I've read, this I didn't look at this in the data specifically, but some of it probably is there are still areas of the world in which male babies are viewed to be better, and so that probably does contribute to some. But I think what I've read is biologically there is an imbalance as well. It isn't just a social constraint. It actually is biological, and that some biologists were trying to come up with the reasons, and that there are evolutionary reasons as to why you need more men than women, because men throughout the history of humanity, go to war and kill each other, and so in order to overcome some of those issues, biology adapted. I don't mean to misstate biologists, actual scientists out there, so go ahead and correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what I remember reading, is that there is some biological component that seems to indicate that more men will be born even in a world where where there is no sex selective abortion, that it is just biologically underlying difference between the number of male and female fetuses.
And if that's the case, I would be really curious to know like what the mechanism is and how it achieves such a subtle distinction. That the
Right.
differentiation would only show up on the scale of millions,
right,
or thousands,
yeah.
I guess.
Yeah, well, I don't. This is learned it from a layman, Tim, and but like I said, I have done some reading from scientists that have studied this, and I don't know that I can state it well, because they had a long paper about just how that works, and how honestly even societal factors seem to actually influence the biology, like of reproduction. So I don't know.
Well, you geneticists out there, you comment in the comment below, and or wait, is that a thing that we do on?
Well, they can answer a Q&A whether or not they liked it afterwards. So that's kind of like the same thing, right?
So
yes, go ahead. Give us your best informed information. Okay, informed information.
And nothing less than informed information, by golly.
Kind of information is not informed.
I've heard a lot. And
yes.
myself.
Okay, let's talk a little bit more about. I think we're going to move on. So world demographics are interesting, and like I said, we have worldwide listeners. The other thing we're going to touch on before we move to U.S.-based demographics is worldwide religions, and this is once again part of the demographic key metrics. And I thought as I was reading through this once again, demographics are often things that as laymen we kind of have a general picture of, but I think it's useful to have a more granular picture and a better understanding of what and where. So Christianity worldwide has 2.38 billion adherents. So that's 31% of the world population. This is as of 2010. Now, I guess 2020, they're working on estimates for these numbers. I don't know. Some of these, it wasn't clear to me whether or not these are estimates for 2020 or this is the data they collected in 2010. But 2.38 billion, and Islam has 1.9 billion, so about 25% of the world population. Secular, non-religious, agnostic, atheist, all together in one category here, 1.19 billion, and that's about 15.58%. And then Hinduism is 1.16 billion, 15%, and Buddhism at 506 million, or 6.6%. And then a number of other, as you go down the list of world religions. But once again, the percentages globally, I think, are interesting, but I think obviously if you drill down a little bit more, you get a better picture of what certain countries look like, what's the populations of certain countries, what religious affiliations they have, and so I think I'm just going to touch on a couple here. Tim, did you know the Vatican City is 100% Roman Catholic?
Wait, what?
For those of you that don't know, Vatican City is that is the smallest country in the world. It is just the Vatican, which is in Italy, which is where the Pope lives. That's the seat of Roman Catholicism. So, yeah, one thing that you didn't learn today is that the Vatican City is 100% Catholic. But yeah, it turns out.
What really blew my mind is if it was like 99% Catholic. You're like, wait, what's going on?
Who's that one guy? No, what this one is interesting. This is almost like a different podcast. I don't even know what these are, but the Pitcairn Islands. Tim, do you know what the Pitcairn Islands are?
Sorry, I was muted. Polynesian Islands, one of the last settled and one of the most remote, with the worst outcomes as far as the population.
Worst? Oh, you mean like what? What do you mean? Like
the population
a lot of people
that
died?
settled there, things didn't go well for them. I guess.
Oh, interesting.
And it was not it was not like your typical. When you think of Polynesian islands, these kind of tropical, breezy, rainforesty places. Apparently, anyways, it was like one of the most remote, and I think easternmost of the island, settled by the Polynesian explorers. And yeah,
This is why we have Tim on the podcast.
and I can speak with authority, assuming that hopefully there's no one from the Pitcairn Islands listening, or actual geographers.
Right. Well, apparently 100% of the population of the Pitcairn Islands is Seventh-day Adventist.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So that was interesting. I certainly didn't know that. Samoa is 99%, or about 99%, it says Protestant. And let's see if we can pick off any more interesting ones here. But Mexico is about 95% Roman Catholic. That's, I think, the largest one country on this list with such a large percentage. I mean, Mexico is a large country, about 95% Roman Catholic.
Even Italy?
Where is Italy?
It's in Europe, Carl.
I do not see Italy on this list of the greatest proportion of Christians. So, sorry.
And now I'd be curious, the Middle Eastern nations and the majority Muslim countries.
Yeah, I was going to touch on that.
Oh, okay. Let's hear it.
Yeah. So, yeah, there are two countries in the Middle East that are 100% Muslim. I don't know what this first one is or how to say it. Mauritania. I'm sticking with that. I don't know what that is. I don't know if it's an island.
Mauritania, an island off of Africa.
Oh. Okay. There you go. 100% Muslim. The Maldives are 100% Muslim.
Also islands?
Yes. And then the Gaza Strip is 99.9% Muslim.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. As far as, I mean, the most, so what you can, there are in the Christian countries, there are a number of countries that are, 92, 93%, 97% even Christian, which is obviously a huge percentage. There are a lot and large countries that are 98 or 99% Muslim, like Iraq is 99%. Iraq is a large country. Turkey is 98.6%. Iran is 99.6. Yemen is 99.8. Libya is 96.6. I mean, these are Pakistan 96.4. These countries are large populations and just almost exclusively Muslim.
United Arab Emirates. I'm curious, just because from what I understand, they have a large immigrant population.
United Arab Emirates doesn't rank in the top 26. Sorry, Tim.
Okay.
Yeah. So that and then for those that are not religious that listen to the podcast, irreligious and atheists, the Czech Republic is 78.4% irreligious or atheists. North Korea is 71.3%. Hong Kong,
That's interesting
54.
that they've got that, almost 30% that still religious in North Korea.
Yeah.
Under that regime.
Right. I don't know what religion that would be. So there are a number of world religions. I don't know, Buddhism. I don't know, honestly, what
Buddhism.
Yeah, you'd imagine, but I don't know.
Do we have any North Korean listeners?
I don't think so.
I
think someone has listened.
That would be pretty cool if we did. But,
yeah, we're huge there. We'll go over with Dennis Rodman here pretty soon, I think. China is 51.8% irreligious or atheist. And then some of the Scandinavian countries rank pretty high on irreligious or atheist. That's the Netherlands at 44%, Sweden at 29%, and so on down. But so Oh, sorry. I have to touch on, at least on Hindus. So number of Hindus per country. Nepal is 81.3% Hindu. India is almost 80%. And as we know, the population of India is it's the most populous country in the world. So that is a lot of Hindus in India. Let's see. Oh, well, hey, look, there's Suriname. This doesn't surprise me. It's 22.3%. I met a lot of Hindus while I lived in Suriname. Suriname and Guyana have a large percentage of people that immigrated there from India, and so they imported their religion. So that is the case in Guyana is 25%. So yeah, there are really two majority Hindu countries in the world, and that's Nepal and India. Real quick, Buddhists, that is Cambodia at 97%, Thailand at 93%, Sri Lanka at 70%, and so on. So, and then there's a bunch of Chinese religions that make up some, but we're going to be done with the religion numbers now here. But that once again, I think gives you an idea of what's going on in those countries, some of their, the identity of the population of the country, and what we could talk about statistics as far as where the trajectory is as far as religious affiliation in the different countries, but that I think is going to be on the scope of this podcast. I wanted to touch a little bit on some U.S. numbers here, because obviously the vast majority of our listeners are in the United States. So we're going to talk a little bit about the United States specifically. Tim touched on a couple of these, but we're going to talk about population. So the United States, as of 2023, projected to had about 335 million people. And how that's distributed, age and sex. Persons under 5, about 5.6%. Under 18, 21.7%. 65 and over at 17%. And then females are 50.4%. So that gives that's a little bit obviously more. That's different than the 1.01 to 1 ratio for the world. Sounds like the United States has more females per male than the world does on the whole.
And I'm doing my part to help that.
Yeah, so am I. We both have a bunch of daughters, for those of you that are wondering. Okay. Race wise, United States is about 75.5% white, 13.6% black or African American. It is 1.3% American Indian or Alaska Native, which this is my plea once again to the Yukon Territory. We need someone in the Yukon Territory to listen to our podcast. I mean, we somehow penetrated Tasmania to the point that every week someone in Tasmania listens to us, but we can't get anyone in. Like, I could almost run to the Yukon, and I can't get anyone to listen.
I'll bet if you ran to the Yukon Territory, someone would get someone.
I should do that. I won't, but I should. Okay, Asian in the United States, 6.3%. Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander, 0.3%. Wow, that's so much lower than I thought it would be. I know a lot of Pacific Islanders. All right, well.
Well, you are in the West Coast, so that would.
Well, that is true. Probably disproportionate representation in among people that I know.
That Hispanic is, I guess, just rolled in with the white.
No, I've got it. I've got it right here. Hispanic or Latino is 19.1%.
Okay, but so.
Oh, you're right. You're correct. I'm sorry. I just looked at it. White is 7. Yes, exactly. So white alone and not Hispanic is 58.9, and Hispanic and Latino is 19.1. So yeah, they rolled them together.
I guess depending on how we characterize it, and that probably is a good point to note, that race classification is hardly as precise as people would, I think, historically observe it to be or think it to be.
Right, because I'm looking at this right here. 2 or more races, 3%. It seems woefully low. Like, right? I mean, there are so many people that are multiracial. I don't know. I mean, maybe that's just my perception, and this is a good chance once again for demographics to kind of reset the picture and be like, oh, this is really a small group.
And we should probably also recognize the limits of these statistics and gathering statistics, where this is probably, how did people check the box when the U.S. Census people came by, and how do I identify myself, whatever my ancestry may be, and so yeah,
right.
These numbers are kind of a fuzzy picture of what's already a fuzzy concept.
Yeah, that's a good point. And demographics as a whole, when we're dealing with numbers this large and characteristics that like race or religion, these things are, amorphous and not always entirely clear lines that can be cut. And so it is useful to recognize that, these statistics, I think, do inform us, but, they're imperfect. And that's a good reminder, Tim. Okay, veterans. There are 17 million veterans in the United States. You know that?
Wow.
Nice. Foreign-born persons, so people not born in the United States, represent 13.7% of all people, of the whole population in the United States. So 13.7%. Let's see, anything else I wanted to touch on? Oh, education. This is, once again, one of those key demographic factors. High school graduate or higher, it's 89.1%, which is, I think, significantly higher than it was in decades past, but still, still something we in the United States need to work on. High school diploma could be higher. Tim is doing his part.
Darn tootin'.
Yes. And he doesn't even get thanked for it or paid.
That's right. My salary is officially categorized as a social gratuity.
Okay, bachelor's degree. So those are people that have graduated college. 34.3%. I could pontificate on that, but I think it's unnecessary. Like I said, demographics, I think, are more interesting to be informed about. What you want to say about it, the spin you want to put on it. It depends on who you are. I think education generally is a good thing. Education and schooling are divergent, but certainly related. So in as much as you can become educated, do so independent of whether or not you think that means higher education or not. Being an informed and educated person, I think, contributes significantly to the quality of your neighborhood, the quality of your city and your county and your state. So
not to mention the quality of your lifestyle.
That too. Yes, we could talk. I think I actually do have some numbers. We're going to wrap up here soon, but about median income.
Real quick, a fun fact, Carl. Did you know that it's illegal to pontificate in the Vatican unless you're the Pope?
That is interesting. Wait, is that true?
I absolutely made that up.
Okay.
But I think it should
arguing some syntax here. Yes. He does pontificate, doesn't he?
That's right.
By definition, even. Okay. Income in the United States, median household income, $75,000.
Dang it.
I was going to say, I think a lot of people listening may have just like collectively gasped. That seems pretty high, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
I mean, I guess I think what you're doing. So median, remind me of your median. Like, are you rolling Jeff Bezos's numbers into this, and then like is he
Well,
like skewing
so
this number north?
no, the average would be skewed by Jeff Bezos because he brings the
Right.
average up. Median is a rough way of correcting that because
Right.
now
You toss
each
those outliers.
income is
Right.
just a value of one as far as the location of it. So
Right.
presumably that's on this scale would be a pretty accurate number. I suppose one thing that probably needs to be noted there is that those so the what that number means would vary largely by region, right? If I am making the median income living in downtown New York City, then I'm probably living pretty hard up. But if I'm making that median income in inland community in, say, suburban Arizona, then I'm probably doing okay.
Right. That certainly makes a huge difference. And then the next number, I think, also once again informs that's a median household income. Per capita income is 41,000. So
wow.
these are mostly two income households is what that's saying.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
That's almost, it's not quite double, obviously. 41,000 doubled would be 82,000, but 75,000. You're saying the vast majority of these households have two incomes, and so that's a picture of obviously the where we are with the economy right now is men and women are both in the workforce, and that's reflected in the median household income. Okay. I think we're almost done here. I wanted to touch on, let's see, a little bit more just briefly on some highlights on education. And that's as of 2021, the highest level of education population, age 25 and older. So once you hit 25, most people are done with formal education. And so at that point, the snapshot and the demographics say that about 9% have less than a high school diploma. 28% have just a high school diploma. 15% have some college but not a degree. 10% have an associate degree. 24% have a bachelor's degree, and 14.5% have an advanced degree, like a master's or a doctorate.
Fancy.
Or what?
I said fancy.
Yeah, exactly. Those highfalutin master's degrees.
Yeah, get out of town.
Yeah, I once again, for the layman that listen to this podcast, my recommendation, and we had a question here, I don't know, a week or two ago, and I'm not great about answering our social media questions sometimes, but they're asking about how to break into tech jobs, and to pull that into a demographics podcast seems like a bit of shoehorning, but I think it's important to recognize that the degree to which you can demonstrate a basic level of education obviously is going to influence the ability you have to get a job. So if you want to raise your income level, if you want, or at least raise the potential or the likelihood that you get a higher paying job, there is no, one-to-one correlation between getting a master's degree and getting a job that pays you more. That's not the case, right? But if we go on statistics, as your education level increases, your salary also increases. And so, if you're looking at these vast numbers of people and all of this data about how demographics and urbanization and all, and you're wondering, well, what do I do with this in my life, and how can I make this useful to me? I think it really is, recognize the trends, and if you need to make more money in order to, survive and or be happy, increase education. Opportunities might be in urban areas. If you live in a rural area, you might be out of those opportunities. Certain countries obviously then have a higher level of older people, so then you need to recognize, okay, well, there's going to be more opportunity in the medical fields, so that can also influence the way what you study and the job that you're looking for. So if you recognize these demographics, it can influence your decisions about jobs and future decisions about where to live. And so I think it's important, regardless of race, religion, whatever else, to recognize that that these demographics are just baseline facts, and then whatever you're going to do with that, it will have an impact on your life and of your loved ones. And so, make informed, good decisions for yourself and for your loved ones, and hopefully be a force for good in your community. And as you look at these trends, demographics are not 100% destiny. You may have heard the phrase before, demographics are destiny. That's predicting the future, right? They influence the future outcomes, right? But the reality is that us laymen, the working man out there, the working woman, as you make good informed decisions, as you strive to be a good neighbor and a good person and to represent your area and your demographic group the best you can, you're going to have a measurable impact. And that isn't, you can't capture that necessarily in a statistic or in a number. But it does, having the full picture gives you a better idea of how to use that your particular skill set. Particular set of skills, like Liam Neeson did in the movie Taken. Right, Tim?
That's right. That is a great monologue, by the way.
Yeah. Anything that ends with Liam Neeson in the movie Taken. Okay. No. Any insight before we sign off here?
Yeah. Can I give a quick blurb on implications, the global stuff?
Shoot.
Okay, so I think, Carl, it was actually your dad who I heard say once that like demographics is like one of the most underreported, like significant things going on in the world. And we live in such a crazy, fascinating time as far as what's happening with world population. So, and it is going to have consequences. Like you said, it's not destiny, but it's sure going to have an effect. Things I think that we can watch for over the next few decades will be, one, looking to see the fallout of collapsing populations in certain areas of the world. You talked about areas that have replacement rate, fertility rate well below replacement rate. I'm sorry, that came out weird, but fertility rates well below replacement, and places that couple that with low immigration are going to see and in fact are already seeing their populations begin to decline. That itself isn't necessarily the worst thing in the world. However, it can lead to severe stresses. For example, most industrialized nations now have highly developed social safety net systems that care for the elderly and everything, that are funded by taxing the working people. As these societies become more and more top heavy, with more old people who aren't working but who are taxing the system, and fewer people of working age to support that, you're going to see stresses on these programs and systems, austerity measures being necessary. You will see social on following those economic stresses, you'll see social stresses as anyways, we don't know exactly what's going to happen, but it's hard to see how it will be pleasant. The other thing to watch for will be watching the regions in the tropics and south of the equator as their population continues to grow, and as they see the benefits from the technological and societal advances that the industrialized nations saw over the course of the last 150, 200 years. So we'll see those huge shifts. We'll probably see lots of shifts of immigration, anyways, it's going to be interesting to watch. I, for one, am grateful that the United States is not leading the pack in any of these regards. And so we will get to see some of the things that happen as other nations go through some of these changes first. But it's just something to pay attention to, and it'll be fascinating to watch, and hopefully we'll be able to navigate it as a global community with minimal harm.
Yes, agreed. Hopefully that is the case. I think the layman, I think it's absolutely important to have a realistic and informed take on what's going to be, based on this demographic picture, what's going to happen in our country, what's going to happen in the world. But once again, I think the layman needs to be a realistic optimist, because I think that's the best way to move forward. In the face of the unknown is informed optimism. And I think that so pessimism might have its place, but I think in the way that demographics should influence your decisions, try to be a realistic optimist. And like Tim said, I mean, the reality is, if your country's aging, you're going to see population decline. So realistically but optimistically, well, what can you do to make sure that you are set up in such a way that whatever economic fallout there is, whatever national fallout there is, that you're set up for success, that your community is set up for success, your family is. So do the things that you think are going to have the best influence and the best outcomes in the future, based on the real picture of the present. So I guess that's why I wanted to do a demographics podcast, because let's get a real picture of the present and move forward from there.
Yeah, prepare wisely, and don't forget to enjoy today and tomorrow. Exactly. Enjoy tomorrow.
Yes. So on that note, hopefully some of these numbers were useful, and if so, go share them with those around you. The more people that we have that are informed and use it in wise ways, the better. So we'll be back again soon. I did tease some podcast guests. I'm working on it. I'm not
as much as
I will be.
Me.
Oh, well, that's true. That won't stop either. But yeah, we'll be back again soon. So join us for our next episode. And thanks.